Portugal journey. I have always been interested in the possibilities of large-scale back-to-the-land movements in my own culture, where a significant percentage of people, not just a handful of alternative-minded folks, fully embrace the ideals of small is beautiful and transition towards something which allows us to live perhaps in a way which harkens back to a time when people lived and died in circles as opposed to squares. How realistic this utopian dream is remains to be seen, yet there are possibilities opening up all the time. And getting access to land is the first step. After all, land is the basis of all that we know, love and depend upon. As my friend Adam has discovered, as well as many other ecologically minded seekers from more affluent countries, Portugal has much to offer in terms of affordable land, which is already developed for predominantly self-sufficient families and communities. Whole regions remain terraced with olives, vines, citrus and many other fruits. You can buy large plots of land already established for immediate cultivation and production for very affordable prices. And there are people out there making this dream happen in some shape or form. I met many people in the local area around where Adam has bought land who were from all over Europe. I made good friends with a couple called Frank and Christina who had lived in Ireland for many years managing a market garden. They had many possibilities of continuing their jobs working the land in the more temperate regions of Europe and seriously considered buying land in both Ireland and the UK. Instead, they chose to buy up a plot in Portugal, and I would hazard a guess that they have never looked back since. Farming, as with nearly everywhere in the world, doesn't make money. This is the primary challenge for most immigrants moving into Portugal from more affluent regions. They wonder, how do I make money out here? Most are considering the possibilities of an international market for their produce, and many are relying on some income-generating source back within their own countries, the most common being the UK, Holland and Germany. And so it was into this context that this journey began. I was seeking to expand my capacity to respond to nature in different climates and bioregions. At the beginning of 2006, I realised that this year was going to be focused around the theme of initiation. I had been given a book from a friend called Long Life, Honey in the Heart by Martin Prechtel, focused around Mayan initiation for the adolescents. One of the repeated themes of this adolescent initiation was in letting go of the safety and comfort of the home and stepping into the larger stream of life, and so becoming a member of the tribe. Although I am no longer an adolescent, I realise that there are aspects of my habits and ways of living that have never grown up, perhaps because there was no social initiations in my teen years, or perhaps that's just the way I am. And yet I identified much with what Martin Prechtel was writing about in saying that we in the West often grow into adulthood without the initiations which would allow us to move through the rocky phase of adolescence, learn its valuable lessons, and grow into adults that have integrated some vital life lessons around facing fears and coming to terms with life. Many of my friends have themselves acknowledged, like me, that we are like a bunch of grown-up teenagers, but still somehow stuck in an adolescent phase of life, worrying and fretting about relatively insignificant things. Journeying on my own was one way I decided to initiate a new phase of my life. Being prepared to let go of my roots so as to find roots in new soil, being ready to let go of the people I know so as to make room for new people. Sometimes, in fact more often than not, it seems to be the pressures of lack of space and clean, healthy environment that cause people to seek outside their home to find new homes. Either that or social unrest. Migration is usually caused by a pressure, either environmentally or socially. I had been feeling the pressure the other way, meaning that, as opposed to feeling like the UK was a refuge for me, I felt the restraint, the pressure to conform to the unrestrained bureaucracy, the challenging climate and weather. And in my unrest of not feeling settled and hungry for more experience, driving to Portugal felt like a migration. I had had many dreams during the winter of being chased or attacked or targeted by thieves, hunters, or malicious people. Always there was fear and some kind of sense of losing something. My dreams told me I needed to do something. Most of all, this meant not staying still, but allowing myself to step into a larger stream and be carried by the currents. These darker dreams kick-started my exploration, without which I may have stayed in my comfortable home here in the UK. Couchsurfing provided me with the opportunity to practice spontaneity. It's so refreshing knowing that with planning just a day or so in advance, you can usually find friendly people to stay with at the drop of a hat. I found myself suddenly joining a contact improvisation class in Brussels for a weekend, before driving down to meet my cousin in Lyon. From Lyon, I drove to Cabanabona in Catalonia to stay with my new calligrapher friends Keith and Amanda, who very kindly organised me a letter carving workshop at an art and design studio called Visions in Barcelona. The money I made over 2 days teaching pretty much paid for my trip, as well as gave me the opportunity to explore Barcelona before heading on to Adams Land in Portugal. Rather than driving direct to Adams from Barcelona, I couch-surfed my way there over 3 days. By the time I got to Adams, I wondered where all the Spanish and Portuguese people were. Since I had arrived in Barcelona, I had stayed with an American and English couple, Keith and Amanda, in Catalonia, a night in Bilbao staying with 2 French women, a French man, a French-Canadian man and 2 German men, and then staying 2 nights in Orense with a Greek man and a Hungarian woman. Where were the real people, the locals? I began to feel like the whole of Spain was one big place for immigrants from other places. Many plant friends were with me the whole way, notably plantain and chickweed, but also the faithful dandelion and calendula. My appreciation of British herbal medicine showed me that the majority of Europe shares the same foundation of plant knowledge and healing, and so shares the same roots of culture. There were a few new finds and certainly different microclimates, but on the whole I found home wherever I went. What became increasingly interesting to me was what I was not finding along the wayside, in places where I might have expected to find certain things. These small indicators suggested changes in the general climate to me, as well as seasonal differences to which I was not accustomed. At Adams Place. The thrill of arrival at my destination gave a huge sense of elation. Sleeping there in the spare caravan in the quiet Portuguese hills, dreams slowly clarified themselves, like the spirits that had been stirred up over the winter causing my troubled dreams were resolving, finding rest. Listening to the dogs barking at night, in the otherwise silent Portuguese nights, I felt myself move back in time and touch something timeless. This place had not changed much over the years.
Oh yeah, what's that stick for?
Hi, Stevie Stingray! Hi, Stevie Stingray! Oh.
Okay.
Okay, so whale underwater up now.
Okay.
Belaya,
Good one.
I got comfortably into the habit of eating citrus fruit each morning, followed by bread and olive oil, and most if not all evenings were accompanied by plenty of wine. Most Portuguese people out here have land to go to in the summer to plant up with vegetables and grow olives and vines and fruit trees, and a winter house to keep people warm in and have as a main home more connected with a community of people. The landscape is very hilly and twisty. In the past, the locals would have to walk 30 plus miles every weekend to get to the market, and then walk back at the end of the weekend to come back, carrying the produce there on the back of a donkey. This would have been the late summer-autumn walk, but for some it may have occurred almost all year round. Dogs are used to guard the houses in the country, while the owners are at their other homes. Dogs were not just for guarding against the human trespasser who might try to take things from an unguarded empty home. They were also to scare away the wild boar, opportunists at any given moment. Nowadays, the local people are quite reliant on their cars for getting about. People walk less and life is a little faster paced, but the basic undercurrent is the same. For me, my car was an essential tool for me to have out there, as it meant that I could easily get to the next town to use the internet in the library, or to visit friends independent from Adam. Adam has made many amazing friends out there living close by him, whom he introduced me to. The couple who I felt a strongest connection with were Frank and Christina. They had previously lived in Ireland, and I immediately felt that there was something quite magical about them. Not only this, I felt that they were almost like a future version of what I would be doing at some point. I could use what they were doing and where they were at as a model to plan where I wanted to get to.
I put lots of this stuff as well underneath the potato beds, so they are planted already. Those beds here. And then when Christina has they shut out pathways or whatever.
Ah, yeah.
I put it down there, and then
Yeah.
I put grass from last year on top, and then it's
Ah, yeah,
compost,
yeah.
and the potatoes I dig out, and it evens out. Then.
I see. So once you dig the potatoes, then this is just all going to get buried in it. Yeah.
But even till then, it would, with the grass on top, it composts
Yeah.
quickly, and it gives nitrogen as well.
Yeah.
All this is a good winter terrace.
Yeah.
For irrigation you can do, but you do have to use a hose or
Yeah.
something. So we tend to cultivate things, and then they fade out in summer.
Exactly, and
Shallow
you've got the damper space down
yeah,
there
yeah. So
for
you
the
move
summer.
around things, but it's
Yeah.
good to. I mean, this was in Brambles when we arrived here.
Yeah.
And it's good to keep it improving and
Yeah.
using it. Otherwise, it grows back into lawn, which is okay, but it has a good microclimate here.
Yeah.
And I planted trees.
Oh, yeah, yeah, all the way along.
And, a fig tree and apricot, and yeah, so all along here.
Yeah. It's quite almost, you've got a very strong temperate region down here because it doesn't get much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in really deep winter, December, the sun doesn't reach here. I mean, now it already reaches quite good.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's quite nice having the extreme contrasts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, means
it's
you've
a
got
blessing because you have a much broader variety of what you can grow.
Yeah. Did you plant the kiwi?
No.
It was already here.
Yeah. It's an old wine.
Right.
But very prolific last year.
Yeah.
2 wheelbarrows only of those plants, and one of them is a male.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Yeah.
This is a cork.
Oh yes.
So I established trees here. As well, this is a kind of rocky area you see sometimes.
Yeah, surface.
Very.
Yeah.
And the idea is to get a good tree cover here, so it's the microclimate is less extreme, so it evens out temperatures as well in summer, and you get the leaves falling and everything. So
yeah. I love all the lavender. It's amazing. So many people living close by Adam are setting up permaculture projects. And what Adam is doing is like a little bit of the big jigsaw puzzle of non-intentional communities. And it is not intentionally non-intentional, it's just by chance. And this chance is created by the amazing opportunities it offers to people, especially families who want to get back to the land without too much hassle from authorities and without too much cost. Most of the Portuguese farmers would rather see the land that is for sale bought up by relatively wealthy Westerners from other countries who genuinely care about the land than bought up by more paper industry feeding eucalyptus capitalists. However, I never got a chance to really dig into how they really felt about many expats moving into the area and buying up land and houses. There was a local market I went to, which most of the local alternative families were taking their produce to, and it was mostly the alternative-minded who were going to this market, though I guess that this was kind of only expected. It would likely not be too much different in any other country, including one's own. Perhaps the most extraordinary meeting I made in Portugal was meeting Adam's next-door neighbour, Herminio. He was an old traditional Portuguese farmer who had the ability to devour wine, probably like all the other farmers around. Health problems had meant that he had had to cut back on his wine drinking recently, but I imagine that at one time he was consuming not far off a gallon of wine a day. He guzzled wine like a thirsty boy guzzled water. It was clear that he was killing himself by the way he lived, but that seemed okay. Sure, it was sad for his family to see him in this state constantly, like looking after a wayward teenager, and a massive drain on their time and energy. But he seemed very happy and not about to suddenly give up wine, his ultimate pride and joy. To me, he was an embodiment of the land. He kept repeating, "Aqui bom," which meant, "here good." You could see in every expression that he made that he not only loved the land, but also would do anything he could to try to preserve it. This included trying to persuade me to get land. We got into a habit of calling on Herminio because of the wine he sold us. In combination with bread and olives, the other thing we got into on a daily basis was wine drinking, and as Herminio sold it to us at €6 for 5 litres, it cost us practically nothing. Adam's Portuguese was good enough to have a full conversation with Herminio, but I was completely stuck. Despite this, I still managed to have some incredibly funny and meaningful connections with him whenever I went round on my own to buy wine. Buying wine off Herminio was no small affair. Firstly, he would invite me in and offer me food, which was usually chicken or pork with bread and olives, and then he would get me to fill up my own 5-litre bottle that I brought with me, after which he would fill up a jug with wine, and we would rapidly make our way through glass after glass while being offered more meats and olives. I would always leave the place thoroughly pissed and laughing to myself about all the conversations that we made, which were simply one way, him forcefully expressing words to me in Portuguese, staring me in the eye as if I would instantly get what he was saying. I would repeat these words and phrases back to him in the same forceful, eager voice, as if by saying these syllables and phrases I would somehow magically understand exactly what he was saying. This way of communicating did sometimes lead to problems. I am reminded of the time there was a cheese festival happening one afternoon. Herminio turned up one afternoon at Adam's, having staggered over from his farm at his snail-like pace due to his health problems and weight. It was always a bit of a problem when he turned up, as it felt like no work could be done on the farm, and as he oozed the spirit of wine out of him, it was hard not to sit down with him for a glass, which inevitably became many glasses. As a way to give Adam some time to get some work done on the farm, I decided for fun to drive with Herminio to the cheese festival for the afternoon, before heading on to a film showing at Benfeita with the hippie foreigners. Herminio got into the car with me, and as we were driving, he indicated with his hand to stop off at his place. He said a few words to me, as if he was getting out. I thought that he meant that he wanted me to have a drink with him before driving off, but I made it clear to him that I could not drink and drive. Then I thought he said he was going to have a drink himself and didn't really want to come with me to the cheese festival. So he got out, and I drove off to the cheese festival on my own, thinking that I could come see him on my way back in a few hours. I got to the cheese festival, and after soaking up the general vibe and buying a few quality cheeses, I drove back to see Herminio with the intention of buying a good 10 litres off him. He had his arms in the air when he saw me. "Why didn't you drive me to the cheese festival at Oliveira de Hospital?" he indicated to me with his Portuguese tongue. After many attempts for me to explain to him that I had misunderstood him and thought that he didn't want to come, and also my useless attempts at trying to explain to him that I now didn't have enough time to take him to the cheese festival, as I wanted to go to the film showing, he managed with his forceful and persuasive demeanour to convince me to drive him all the way back to the cheese festival. Feeling slightly defeated, but also surrendering to the moment, this time I took his directions through the winding hills back to Oliveira de Hospital, catching his excited eyes as he directed me a completely different way. It dawned on me that as I drove through all these little villages and winding roads, the real way to get to know a new country is to get to know the real people of that country, and get them to show you round. He showed me where to park, so that we could be really close to the festival, and then we walked at Armenio pace to the square where all the stalls were, under a huge tent. Inevitably he bumped into old friends that he knew, and I began to see things a little more through his eyes. It was strange, but just being with him I felt a little more at home in the atmosphere of the cheese festival. After wandering around for about half an hour, buying a few more cheeses that Armenio recommended, he led me to Chiaroscuro restaurant, which was not really a restaurant as the Brits know, but more like a chicken and chips fast food place. He had been indicating earlier in the week that he wanted to take me and Adam out to a restaurant to eat chicken, and now he had his chance. We ordered chicken and chips, which came on 2 big shiny plates for us to help ourselves, as well as a plate with bread and a jug of red wine. There was so much food that we barely managed to finish it. He was so drunk that he could barely pour me another glass of wine. Now, surely, it was time to go back. I finally dragged him back to the car. Staggering and satisfied, he got in and began directing me to what I thought was back home. It turned out to be another restaurant bar 5 miles away, which I only knew when he indicated me to pull into a car park next to a hotel. At this point I lay down the line and plugged in my sat-nav. I was going to drive him back and chuck him out at his home whether he complained or not. Finally I arrived back at his home in Anseriz and had just enough time left to catch the end of the film showing before heading off to Frank and Christina's for the night.
save the world in God's name. Revival every day, revival every night. Now pastor life the better, the people they suffer. Them say the Savior they come, many don't die the way time. Now the people wonder.